Hello and welcome to the second tutorial of this mini-series where I'm sharing my journey on how to build a Chrome extension featuring almost 6 small apps, which will get displayed every time I open up a new tab. So in this one, we just want to say hello to the user, just like that one. Just say, type a name here, hit enter, and it's going to be saved to the browser's local storage. So again, we're going to use React to implement the small functionality. So all we need to do is actually having a heading and an input field where we want to enter the name, which by the way, like I said, is going to be saved in the local storage. Okay, now let's get into it. So first off, I'm just going to create the component folder, just like we did with the time component in the last tutorial. So we'll call it greeting, okay, and then it's going to have a couple of files in the greeting.js and another one for the CSS. Okay, close that. So as always, going to be creating a stateless functional component, and the name is, you guessed it, all right. And then in the return statement, we're just gonna return some a div and greeting, okay, because this is gonna share the same widget style of the time component, like in this one. Okay, this is not gonna work because the syntax isn't reserved for React. So inside this div, we're just gonna put a span, test things out, okay, and we're gonna put a br, and the second part of this div is just gonna be a simple form that's gonna have an input with type text. Right, so that's kind of the starter HTML template that we're going to use for this component. Now let's just import it here. Let's say greeting here, close it, and let's just save that and go ahead here. What's going on? And you can see it here. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna comment this out because I just want to set the focus just on this one. You can see it here. Awesome. Now I'm gonna make this this greeting message kind of dynamic. It's gonna be based on the time of your location. So this is gonna be a greeting message. This greeting message is gonna be updated with the most appropriate value. Just like in this one, it says good evening because the time is, as you can see, it's 10 p.m. right? So I'm gonna first create a hook for this span. It's gonna be message, and you're gonna set message. Okay, I'm gonna say use state. Okay, I don't know what's going on with that. Should be just React, and it's gonna be empty by default. So like I said at the beginning, I want this greeting message to be kind of interactive, so I'm gonna use some if-else statements to work it out. It's gonna be that simple, just to let you know. So all I need to do is to set a specific message for each time interval. I mean, if the current time is between 12 p.m. and say 5 p.m. for instance, we should say good afternoon. If it's higher, we're gonna say good evening, just like that one. Okay, so we need to bring in the date object so we can use its values like minutes or hours, for instance. So first, let's just create a new instance of the date object. We're going to say let d equal to new date, and then I'll say let age is equal to b dot get hours. Now, like I said, I want this handler to say good morning when time is between 4 a.m. and 12 a.m. So I'm going to simply say if age is greater than 4 put less than 12, then set this greeting message to good morning. Okay, some people wake at 12 p.m. Else, if age is greater than 12 this time and less than 5 p.m., we're just gonna say set greeting message to good afternoon. Otherwise, I'm just gonna set it to good evening. Hopefully this makes sense. See, it's not a big deal. Okay, so if you want to run the current state of this code, I think here, we save and refresh, let's inspect, you can see the almighty too many re-renders error. So let me explain why. Now this chunk of code should have been packed in a special kind of wrapper, which happens to be another React hook, the useEffect hook. Or you can put it in a normal function if you want, and trigger a page reload to refresh the time. But in my case, I want to go with useEffect. So why do we need this hook, or where or when do we use it? Well, there are several use cases where you can implement this hook, but according to the official docs, the useEffect hook is used to tell the component to do something after render. In other words, run the specified code block inside the useEffect when you render. Hopefully that makes sense. Alright, it is generally used for side effects, which could be things like fetching data from other resources, or maybe something like set timeout function and that kind of stuff. So let me just show you now the way we use this hook. Let's say useEffect, okay, and then the first argument is going to be a callback function, and it's going to have another argument which is called the dependency array. Now, speaking of this dependency array, this means the callback function, the code that you're going to write right here, is going to run based on the dependency array. If you have like a specific state you want to trigger, if this state changes, then the useEffect is going to rerun again. And that's the general idea about this array. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this part inside this useEffect hook. Okay, so if I save it now, refresh the page here. What's wrong with that? Minify it. That should be this one. This is ridiculous. There we go. It says good evening, which happens to be right. So if I happen to set, for example, change this to 23, good afternoon. Awesome. So this is the side effect function, and this is the dependency array. Alright, I think the first part of this component is done. Now let's head on to the forum and see how to deal with it. So we'll take care of this input. And to handle this input, we need to add an attribute that's going to trigger every change being made inside the input field, the input box here. Okay, so this attribute is called onChange, and it's gonna require an onChange handler. Say onChange, and here I'm gonna take this event, okay, and what I'm gonna say, when there is something being typed here, I'm gonna set the user name to the value of this target. Okay, now let's just create a hook for this username. I'll say const username and set username here. It's going to be use state again, and this is going to be empty as well. So inside the curly braces, we can put some JavaScript logic, which could be a function call, just like that one, maybe a conditional statement, I'm talking about the ternary operator in this case, because you can't put an if statement in JSX here. Just to let you know what kind of JavaScript you can write, you can do inside JSX. So this username hasn't actually been created, so I'm gonna go back to the top here, and I'm gonna add for it const username, and then set it use state and set it to empty as well. So the username is now going to be updated with the content that's being typed in the input element, but we need to see it in action. So I'll just save and see what's going on here. So we can type and do all that kind of stuff, but we can't see it. So the username is going to be updated, like I said. So in order to be able to trigger these changes, we'll add a button to handle form submission. Or we can attach an event listener to the form, but I'll do this later. So here inside the form again, what I'm going to do is say button, and I'll say submit, and it's going to be type now. I'm gonna add an event listener for this one, and when this happens, we're just going to submit username. Now let's create this handler. We'll say const username is equal to the following. Well, to test things out, we're just gonna console.log this username. Well, let's see it. Say Mike. Okay, if you have been paying attention to this console, you probably have catched the username. So let's just try again. Save. There we go. Just the page reload has taken it. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to say E. This is an event. I'm just going to prevent the default behavior of HTML forms. And that means when we submit, it's not going to reload the page. Alright, now let's render that in the actual page, right here, underneath it. So at the bottom of the form, outside of the form, I'm just gonna put a span, and I'm gonna say username. Okay, I'll save, and there you go. You can see it here. I'll say Mike, but it's gonna be updated in real time. I don't want to see this behavior. I just wanted to see it here when I click the submit button. So one way to fix this is by using a kind of conditional statement. So the first thing I'd like to do is to get rid of that username here. Okay, I'm just gonna copy it, and I'm gonna remove it from here, and I'll go right up here underneath this handler. I'm gonna do something a little different. So if something is true, then I'm gonna do the following stuff. Let's say name, and we're gonna say if something is true, then we're going to set the name variable to be this HTML element, which is the span element. So if something is true, the name is going to be this one. And then we're going to put the name back to here. Just say name. Now, in this case, nothing's going to change. Say Mike, and I can see it again. So we're going to have a sort of turnaround about this name variable. Now, instead of this true value, just like that, I'm just going to create another hook, and I want this hook to be true whenever the form is submitted, right? When I submit the form, this hook, this one, condition is going to be true. So what I'm going to say here, const is made, is the form from submission made or not. I'm going to say set is made. I'm going to say use state, and this time it's going to be defaulted false. All right, and then here, what I'm going to say, if is made instead. If is made is true, we're going to do that, else we're just going to resume the rest of the code. So like I said, I called it is made because that's a little significant at some point. You can say is submitted for instance, which is probably more relevant. So what's next? Okay, underneath the form here, I'm just gonna make some tweaks for this thing. So all I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna say if is made is true, then I'm gonna show a span. And this span is gonna have the name variable right here. That's how you do it. Now if I save, refresh the page, I'll say Mike, where is it? It's not showing. Well, let's just check our code and see what is wrong here. So why didn't this show up? So we set the default value of isMade to false, and then walking all the way down, we can notice that we didn't change anything. False, which means isMade is going to be false. So at this point, isMade is false, so it's not going to run that. So the name here, span, is not going to show, right? So when we want this boolean to be true, well, like I said, if the form has been submitted, then here we're going to set isMade to true, all right? I'll say Mike again. There we go. Yeah, now we can see it. So this was fine. Now I think we still have to add some tweaks before we finish this. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get rid of this button here and add an event listener on submit handler right here. So instead of clicking that button, we can just same thing. Cool. So far, the name span doesn't show up unless isMade is true, but the import is always shown no matter the state of isMade. Now, based on the widget design here, the current behavior of these elements doesn't obey this design. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make isMade state switching between true and false based on the element's appearance. So if the input is shown just like that, that means isMade is false and the name span is hidden. On the other hand, if isMade is true, we submitted this, then the span should be displayed just like that, and the input is going to be hidden. Okay, so all I need to do is to come back here, and before this form, what I'm going to say, I'm going to put some simple logic here. So if isMade is false, I'm going to show the form. Okay, else I'm going to put that, and we're going to get rid of this one because we no more need this stuff. Alright, now let's just save that and see what happens. I'll say Mike, hit enter, there we go. The input now has gone, and this is what we wanted. But if we click on Mike, if you want to show back the input, we're going to have to refresh the page, which is not a good behavior. So now what I'm going to do, what I want to do, when I click this span, it's going to set isMade to true, which will hide the span. Now, when I click this span here, I want to hide this span, and I'm going to show the form. Alright, so we're going to add an event listener for that one as well. It's going to be, click, and when this is clicked, I'll say open name input. Alright, let's do it. So all it does is const open name input. It's going to be the following thing. So it's just going to set isMade to, I think it's going to be false, like I said. Well, let's see. I'll say Mike, submit. If I click again, there we have it. We can now see the input. Okay, so now let's just import the CSS file and talk a little bit about it so we can see a better UI. Alright, let's save that. Let's import it. Import reading.css. Save it. Okay, well, we have added time card, and that means we're gonna import the time CSS slash time CSS. There we go. I don't know what's wrong with that. I'm sure there's a missing thing here. Yeah, the span is gonna have a class name of username. How about that? No, not this one. Yeah, the form, exactly. It's about the form. Should have a class name called waiting for. Save. Awesome. If I say Mike, there we go. I can see it. I'll just add this thing. Okay, cool. Now, talk about this CSS. We just have center line things, higher line height, and we got some width, margin, padding. Set the background to transparent so we can see this effect. Okay, there's no border, no outline, and change the caret color to white. It could be shown on a black background. And the username is just going to be bold. That's it. Let's just say Mike. Now if you reload the page, the username is vanished, and that's obvious. So now we'll use the browser's local storage to store the username and keep it for us. So all we need is a couple of use effects, one to get the name and the other to set it to local storage. So right up here, I'm going to say effect, and I'm going to say this thing, empty dependency array first. And what I'm going to do, we're just going to get this item. We'll say item is equal to local storage dot get item, which is the username. Okay, and then we're going to parse it. So we're going to call it loaded item is equal to JSON.parse, and we're going to pass in the item. Now I'm going to say if the item has been loaded, we're going to set username to that loaded item, and that's it for the first part. So this first use effect is going to load the username only when the username is set. So now let's set it. I'm going to say use effect. I'm going to say do that, and I'm just going to say set used JSON. We're just going to stringify this username. Okay, and then we're just going to pass it here. And then back to the local storage, we're going to set the item that is called username to this JSON. I'll say username, and this is going to be set to this value. Okay, and now we're going to pass in something in the dependency array this time, and this is going to be the username itself. So when the username is changed, this use effect should run again. Now let me just show you this in the DevTools. So it's already ready here. Just clear this. I'm just gonna say Mike. So Mike now is the value of the username. Now if I refresh the page, it's gonna be persistent. Now if I come back here, like I said, refresh, I mean the value is still here, but it's not showing here, and this should be related to the input element. So here, I'm going to set the value attribute to username. Now if I save it, refresh, it doesn't matter. Awesome. The exclamation mark is gone. There should have been something wrong with that. I mean, refresh. That means this use state should be set to true as the default value. So this is working properly. I think we're done now. I guess everything is alright. I'm just going to change the font family and maybe something else in the last part of this series when we reach this widget because it's gonna be a global font family. So we're done with this app. We finished building the reading component, so let's just check it. And you know, the next part is gonna be the weather app until we reach building this bookmarks app, this one. Okay, so thanks for watching and see you in the third part of this series.